A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling choicey adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. This week we are reading through chapter 32 of the Red Rising Saga's second book, Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. It's a fun chapter. It's a fun little book. I think I'm just going to go ahead and start my review right now without Crossland because I deserve to do this on my own. So, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. Let's get crossing here.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, contrary to PJ's belief. This is a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike.
It doesn't
we tackle fiction
Could
novels.
just be novice. Could just be me.
And love to talk about what we're drinking. You can think of us as your drunk weekly book club.
One of these days, I'm not going to tell you what day we're recording, and I'm just going to do it without you and see how it goes. I don't think it'll be good, but it'll be something.
I wonder how far you'd make it without our script.
Oh, I'd still use the script that you write for us. And by script, I mean like writing prompts. It's not really a script. But
bullet point outlines, yeah. But
keep us on track because we lose focus quite easily. Yeah, no, it would be dog shit and no one would listen to it. So shut up, Crossland. Stop interrupting me. As I said before, chapters 25 through 32 of part 3.
But before we do that, let's talk about what we're drinking. So PJ, what are you having?
So I made an experiment. I made an experiment on my liquor shelf. And it is bullet rye in a small quarter-liter bottle, probably, something like that, with some dehydrated oranges, a clove, and a stick of cinnamon. And I let that sit there for like a week. And just by the smell of it, it's going to be a spicy boy. There's a lot of smells coming off of this thing. I think the clove went kind of ham. So
have you not tried it yet?
I haven't tasted it yet. No.
Oh yeah, give it a sip. Let us know how it tastes. We got to figure out if it's good or not.
Oh man, the orange comes through a lot. It falls off completely though. It doesn't have any sort of linger like rye tends to. Rye is kind of hidden. It just kind of tastes like orange and cinnamon and smells like cloves.
Weird.
And then there's an alcohol burn. So it's okay, probably not worth the wait.
Well, that is certainly a review.
I think if I made an old fashioned out of this, it'd be good. A little bit more sweetness to it, and
yeah, like you can balance it out. You can totally balance it out. What are you following that up with?
I have a can of Verbal Tip from Falling Knife. It's a hazy IPA with Mosaic and Citra, and I think I slobbed all over the knob of Falling Knife a couple episodes ago, so I'm not going to go back into that again, but they're great. Now, what have you got?
So I am having a completely original cocktail. So as a note, I did receive a gift this year for Christmas. In addition, we posted on Instagram and everything else. I got a cocktail book, among other things, and I felt kind of inspired. So I went ahead and I've like pre-made a couple of different liqueurs to mix into things over time. They generally need a little bit longer in terms of aging. So to like rapidly age something so I could do something cool for the podcast, I made a chili liqueur, which is tequila and poblanos generally, and you kind of let it age and sit for up to 2 weeks to kind of soak in that to kind of give it the poblano taste. You de-seed the poblanos, of course, in a reposado white tequila, which means 1 year old. Anyway, just a bunch of stupid terms that I've learned. Basically, I made an original drink with aged rum, this chili liqueur that I made, and 1 ounces of simple syrup, and an orange squeezed and twisted with a big icy boy. Calling it a high red to go against the low red, because this one is a lot classier.
It is.
And boy, oh fucking boy, is it delicious. It
sounds really good. I want to make that.
It's good. So the key is definitely getting a good rum.
Okay.
I'm not using a white rum, but I'm using a barrel aged rum for 2 year. It gets a little bit it gets a little bit more of the complexity as opposed to the like forced fake spiciness.
What tequila did you use, if you don't mind me asking?
Just Camarena or whatever it's called.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good tequila. It's out of Jalisco.
Jalisco.
But yeah, so the drink is amazing. I'm following that up with a tropical Kush India IPA from Sycamore. 7%er, just solid beer. Made in Charlotte, North Carolina. So very good.
Good deal. Alrighty. Well, that wraps up the drinks, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I have to sneeze for some reason. Jeez.
Well, go ahead. Let that bastard out.
Woo. Okay, so that definitely wraps up the drinks. So we're going to move into last week's predictions, our little lightning round. 3 that we'll talk about this week that came up. So we'll start with the first one. Will things change now that Severo knows about Darrow? And you said Darrow is going to conspire to make plans with him going forward. We decided kind of to just pay this one off now because it was a stupid-ish question. I mean, it's not stupid, right? It's a good question. But out of all of the Howlers, Severo is the most committed.
Yeah.
Can you kind of prove that throughout the section? So I don't feel like that's maybe... I mean, do you feel like it's going to change?
No.
Not for Severo.
Right.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna take my drink for that one.
Okay.
All right. Very good. So good work on that prediction there. Ooh, it burns a little bit. Oh, so good. Okay. Anyway, at what point does Roke confront Darrow, or does Darrow confront Roke? Was a question from last week as well. You said Darrow confronts Roke. You were, in fact, incorrect. Roke does confront Darrow.
Wrong.
First, talking with him on the bridge in the middle of this part.
I have a bottle of simple syrup right there. I'm going to grab that real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to put a couple drops of simple syrup in this thing because I think that'll help it.
Doctor the drink up a little bit. Okay.
All right, let's see.
Let you finish.
Yeah. That actually brings out the rye a little bit too, interestingly. But I'll do some experimenting and probably get it back on the show at some point. Anyway, I took a drink.
Sounds good. Number 3 is Ganymede is a rim moon mentioned at the beginning of the next section. Do you think we head to the rim soon? And if so, do you think we might see Lorn again? You said...
I said that he would, for the sake of time, probably just send some of the less trustworthy Howlers. And nope, he's there.
Yeah, pretty much this entire bit takes place here in the rim.
Yep. Gave himself a good rim job right there.
Ooh. Well, big mistake. You owe us a drink.
That is a big mistake. Don't do that to yourself. Sorry. Yeah, I'll drink. All right.
Better for that one. Insulting our lower intellects. Just kidding.
No, we love our lower intellects.
Jesus. Okay. With that, let's get into chapters 25 through 32. So we are in part 3, Conquer, which we talked about previously. Chapter 25, Praetors. So there's a lot of politicking right away in the beginning, and I really kind of like it and appreciate it. And I like specifically how this scene kind of slows down, and Mustang really kind of becomes the center stage when she walks in, kind of throwing her apple every time she takes a bite to interrupt Pliny speaking. I'm
going to interrupt you right now because I have a question that pertains to Praetors, the name of the chapter. I don't know if this was explained and I just missed it, or if it's a term that is used and I don't know it outside of this book. But what is a praetor and how are they designated that?
So it is a Roman term, of course, because everything is Roman.
Okay.
But praetors are the people who roll up ultimately underneath the archgovernor or lord or anyone. They're kind of like generals. They were made out to be the marshals of a house. You know, praetors were being a praetor of a fleet was a big deal previously.
Right.
That was a big deal in Red Rising, the first book.
Yeah, but it never explained what it meant, or I missed it. I probably just missed it.
It's like a higher vassal. So a vassal would be a lower class, and working your way up to praetor is you yourself are a leader. Think of the Knights of the Round Table. In terms of history, praetor are Roman magistrates that rank below council.
Okay.
So specifically though, reacting to Pliny is very interesting here in the way that she kind of continues to cut him off because he's a soft-bellied pixie and a piece of shit and should be admonished as such. So,
Yeah, he's pretty sneaky snaky
Also, sneaky snaky. Some kindergarten rhyme bullshit up in here. Jesus. The Teleman's presence here is also great, and it's nice to get to know Cavix and Daxo a bit more than just kind of being introduced to them in a rush of violence, which has been kind of the previous state of being. Mm-hmm. Even seeing them under Nero and kind of within his presence moderates them, of course. But I also like how they call, him a pixie.
Yeah, I do love everything about Cavix throughout this entire chunk. Everything that I learn about him first of all, like calling someone a pixie and then immediately going into like coddling and like cooing towards his pet fox and feeding it fucking jelly beans. I mean, I don't know necessarily what the like how far encompassing the term pixie is within this society, but like that feels like a pixie move.
I feel like he's just taking care of a pet.
It's
I think
not just taking care of a pet. Think about the lady that carries around her Pomeranian in her purse and feeds it like, I don't know, Werther's Originals or something.
Let the old crazy man be happy to have this fox, you know?
Oh,
he literally shuts it up.
Don't get me wrong, I love it, but
this pixie talk chafes my balls and chafes my balls. Like, it's just so good.
I love
shouts it.
I love him. I'm sure we'll get more into him later, but
man. Yeah, totally. He's a funny dude, and getting introduced to him and Daxo as well. Daxo being a smarter, you know, obviously like not 100,000 years old version of him, a little bit more conniving in that way, but still kind of warm in a way that a lot of other golds aren't.
Yeah. Is this where the description of Cavex is? Being like shaved head and dyed red beard?
No, that was previous.
That was previous. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So he's just completely contrarian to like the typical fashions of Gold Society in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. He is totally contrarian in just about everything that he does and every way that he acts too. So it totally fits.
Yeah.
So yeah, finally, after a lot of conversations all over the place about the ill likelihood of gaining allies from the Moon Lords, Darrow reveals a grand plan to steal all the ships from them and force them into being allies through abducting all of their children.
It's bold. I'll give him that. It's a bold one. It's
a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off.
Yeah, it may be a little rash. We'll see. But knowing Darrow, he's got a plan. But I can only imagine like looking around that room after he says that and just seeing the jaws hit the table and like not knowing how to respond, because that's some maniacal shit right there.
Oh yeah. It's an absolutely crazy. It truly is, like you said, a crazy plan to take advantage. Everyone calls him insane.
But like think about his sort of winning move in the Institute to go take Olympus. Like that was the same sort of reaction.
Yep.
But he's got a track record to kind of prove himself.
Right. He's done this. You know, it's not out of reach. It's not completely out of the question. And that's why, you know, Nero admires him so and like smiles and is like, we're definitely going with this plan, especially in the next chapter. But we'll get to that in a second. I think it's interesting to just mention Pliny right now with a quote in this chapter that reminds me specifically of the character that I find him most akin to in other fiction, which is he reminds me of a more snivelly Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, like a little whelp. You had made mention of this, the quote, like, how did you come to know this information? And then Darrow responds, little birds whisper into my ear too. And that literally feels like it was pulled straight from Game of Thrones. I know that the little birds thing isn't from Littlefinger, but like it feels, he just feels like a shittier version of Littlefinger.
He does. It's completely true.
And I don't mean shitty in the way where he's written poorly. I mean shitty in the way that his character is a piece of shit.
Yeah. Like he's a great character, but utter garbage, and I want to burn his mattress with him on it.
That's oddly specific. I'm a little afraid.
You should be. I know where your mattress is.
Fuck. Okay, so with that, chapter 26, I've been threatened. I'm calling the police. You know, I think it's funny out of the gate to right with Pliny right away. Start of this chapter seems to be playing right into Darrow and the Sons of Ares' hands. You know, like he literally calls out basically what Darrow is trying to accomplish.
Yeah. This will fracture everything.
Like he literally says it out loud.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will, Pliny.
Yep, that is actually the point. You're right, Pliny. Good call.
Yep.
Good call. I will fracture everything. These people are misled into believing that it will help them. In reality, I will seize the moment and become a different God King. Wait, what? No,
no,
maybe not.
Yeah.
You think so?
I like that idea. Darrow's going
God
to become
King
a corrupted, like power-hungry madman, and will completely abandon his goals.
His goals,
Or his
just to
moral
take down
goals.
society.
Like, he'll maintain his goals of conquering society, but the goals of overturning it and killing it, no. He's just gonna sovereign Darrow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really like the kind of premonition and the dramatic irony that we get from it.
Just to be clear, like I do not believe that's what will happen.
It would be kind of insane, wouldn't it? Though
It'd
get into kind of what Lorn was saying.
It'd be a fun dream sequence for the TV show to go on, like a three episode long dream sequence of him conquering the society.
You know, my favorite TV show has 2 incredible Dream Quest dream sequences, and I could see that being real.
Which ones?
Both of the dream sequences and Dream Quest sequences are in The Leftovers in season 2 and season 3.
Okay.
Episode 8 and episode 4. Yeah, I think it's 4. Dude, it's my favorite TV show. There's only like 28 episodes.
I've never heard of it. I don't think you've ever mentioned it to me.
What? The Leftovers is my... Okay, anyway, we're going to move on before I riot. We'll talk about it later. So I really like the little argument that also happens here between Mustang and her father. I think it carries a lot of weight in the way that, you know, he still, even though she acted, doesn't see or understand what she's done or why she's doing it. And literally, she's responsible for saving 100% of them in this room and doesn't command any respect for it. Mm-hmm. It's that like fake meritocracy that exists.
Yeah. Just kind of a comment on meritocracy in general. It's complete bullshit in pretty much every single like instance that it's ever been like had, right? Like I can't think of an actual meritocracy that wasn't just kind of a facade to make everyone feel better about being in an authoritarian rule.
Oh yeah. I thought you were going to relate it back to the story. Like,
oh no, just in general. Like, do you have any examples, like in fiction or in history, of an actual meritocracy?
No, I feel like meritocracy to some degree is what leads to a lot of dystopian ideals. You know, if you think about like the origins that are kind of loosely hinted at with Brave New World, in wherein like the clone society was established, or even here, you know, meritocracy is sort of the establishment specifically for golds, but the rest of society isn't a meritocracy. It's kind of an autocracy.
Well, it's not even a meritocracy for golds, though. Like, that's a complete bullshit as well. Like, it's all fake.
Yeah, meritocracy in big quotation marks. Big old quotation marks.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to do some studying and see if that's ever actually been a thing in any sort of work of fiction where it doesn't devolve into dystopian futures or like fake merit-based rule.
Yeah, totally.
We'll see. I'll report back with my findings.
That okay, I'm in.
All right.
I'm in.
All right.
I'm in to hear more about your meritocracy research you do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So following that up, like immediately afterwards, though, she finally, no, I mean, it's a good thing to talk about. Following that up immediately afterwards, though, is this interesting conversation where she basically pulls back the power due to that lack of respect. You know, like he goes so far as to like call her a whore at some point here, right? Like it's literally so crazy that he like runs down that channel of thought. But Darrow basically comments after she pulls back that power and that authority, his love is the most conditional I've ever seen. How quickly he can call his daughter a whore, then smile as she reclaims what power she lost in the...
Yeah.
You know?
He really doesn't treat her like a daughter. He kind of treats her like a soldier or a subject of some sort. And much like the Sith, he deals strictly in absolutes. Just his condemnations and his praises for anything are to the nth degree. Like everything is amazing or like just perfect, or it is dog shit. And there's very little in between as far as what Nero comments on.
He does deal in absolutes. Maybe Nero is a Sith Lord after all. Mm-hmm. Is this Star Wars? It's not Star Wars.
They're in war in space.
Yeah, there's no space wizards, though. So
Nero's kind of a space wizard.
I mean, filling someone's head with grapes is not space wizardry. It's just pain.
No, but floating down from the sky and hanging a girl is kind of space wizardry.
Yeah, I mean, magic isn't technology
he who I described as Gandalf the Nebulous?
Yes,
on?
You did. You did describe him as Gandalf the Nebulous.
I think it was him specifically. Space wizard.
Loading down. Yeah, it's crazy interesting. And then the way that Augustus is just sort of like claims the power in the room thereafter again, kind of just like his daughter had before. He declares that Darrow's plan is the best and that that's the one that they should go with because he doesn't want to run away like a pixie, like the pixie was suggesting. It's kind of like he draws the air out of the room and into the vacuum of space here. Everyone goes so like quiet and amenable and he just commands so much authority. Mm-hmm. It's great.
Yeah. And I mean, the writing itself is beautiful, but my favorite within that section is the description of what Pliny is like looking like and acting like. Looking, quote, like watching a child try to hold on to a handful of sand. Just frustration and not quite able to understand why it's not working for him. Just futile, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he just absolutely
satisfying
cannot go against anything that Darrow's saying at this point. It's nice to see that reversal over these, 100 or 200 pages.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So Darrow's conversation with Augustus post their decision feels very, very aggressive at first, leaning into trust and the certainty of Darrow's position. I feel like we're back to walking that very thin line, stepping on that tightrope. Will he be found out for, a second again? What do you get out of it?
So what I sort of really gleaned from that section was that Augustus is entirely, and I guess probably most of Gold Society in general, is entirely aware of the position that they have put all the other lower colors into, of sort of psychologically breaking them down and keeping them literally as slaves in most cases. The sort of lies being fed to the lower colors aren't really fed to the golds. Like they are completely aware of what they're doing to everybody, but they're being told that it's for the best of everyone, even though they're the ones that are benefiting. So it made me sort of really think about how that dynamic works, but also what the vulnerabilities of that sort of way of thinking are. And maybe thinking it might be a lot easier for Darrow to actually convert some of the golds into helping him. It kind of gave me a little bit of hope there. If that makes sense.
It's interesting.
Like,
yeah.
It's not like they're all brainwashed into thinking that everything is perfect. They know that things are unjust for the lower colors, but what they believe is that it's for a good reason.
Yeah, I feel like that comes even more into play with Lorn than it does Nero. Nero, I think, believes in the slavery for maintaining power.
Right.
But I think especially with Lorn, that becomes a big deal.
Mm-hmm. It made me think of the scope of the deception towards the lower colors and what the golds actually thought about it.
That certainly makes sense. I mean, it does play into that and kind of the way that they're maintaining power and maintaining this grip over everyone. It's certainly interesting.
Right.
We also get a bit of backstory here on Lorn as well. He had 4 sons, 3 died in front of him, while the 4th died in an accident, as explained from Nero. The last was Lysander's father, and how now Nero's recruited him to go get Lorn to them in their quest against Octavia.
Yeah, so this made me realize how wrong I was about what was it, 2 episodes ago?
I think it was 2 episodes ago.
I think it was, where I said that, I think my exact quote was Lorn had Willow Wade himself into Octavius's bedchambers or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. It's just through marriage of their children, which is less juicy, but I guess it makes sense. It makes more sense.
That's fair. That's fair. I get it. So,
yep.
With that, we move into the most logically named chapter, given the whole theme of the book is abducting the cook, titled chapter 27, titled Jelly Beans.
Yep.
Which is a great title, harkens back to food and the hunger that we all feel.
And cooks make jelly beans.
Cooks make jelly beans. You're right. The ideology fell apart here, but we'll get back to it eventually, I swear. So we get a really interesting conversation in this short chapter with the Telemanuses, Dexo and Cavex. You know, it's great to return, pick up the story, like I said earlier, and finally actually get to meet them and talk with them. I had a question. I know obviously there aren't a whole lot of other people in this story that are similar to them, but if you had to pick out people or characters that were similar in other works of fiction, you know, who do they remind you of?
Ooh. Okay. I've got one. I don't think it works perfectly, but just thinking about how Daxo was secretly like putting jelly beans into Darrow's coat in order to like trick his father into thinking that there were like magical omens telling him good things were happening. It makes me think of Little John and sort of like the snake dude from Robin Hood, like the animated Robin Hood. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like the big bear that's Little John, and then his companion who's the snake who's actually doing all the dealings.
So John's not the bear, John's the lion, but
well, yeah, whatever it is. Like
Sir Hiss is the snake. Yeah. But
yeah.
John, yep. That's interesting.
So I think it's a very loose sort of comparison, but that's my immediate read. Do you have a like comparison in your head?
I mean, specifically
that you were
with
digging
Cavex.
for in that question?
No, I'm not. I'm just asking. You know, the question in general. I think it's an interesting thing to think about, just because I think they're kind of a unique character type. But personally, to me, Cavex kind of has like a Hagrid quality to him.
Okay.
From Harry Potter. So like just kind of big, warm, welcoming. Not always the smartest or the most on top of things, but definitely loyal.
I don't know if I agree with that. He seems to be the one who's truly in charge, even though he's silently in charge of the Telemanuses because of his like ways of sort of tricking his father into seeing omens.
Oh, I'm saying Cavex, not Daxo.
I think you said Daxo.
Oh yeah, I meant Cavex.
Yeah.
Is Hagrid.
I might have misheard you, but I'm pretty sure you said Daxo. So never mind.
Daxo's definitely playing at larger ambitions. You know, we know that he's roughly the age of Carnus. Yeah. Because they were in the Institute together.
But do you think he's using his father's like condition to his own advantage a little bit?
I don't know. Do you think he's using?
That's kind of the read I got on it.
Do you think he's using his father?
Yeah. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
But not for necessarily insidious reasons, but just for the well-being, knowing that his father is, I don't know if it's here where they talk about him getting hit on the head a bunch of times in his youth, but like he's clearly not like with it.
Yeah, he's definitely been incapacitated.
Yeah. So Daxo, upon leaving this conversation, like I think he like pops a couple jelly beans into his mouth and like winks at Darrow to sort of show him like that. Yeah, that's where the jelly beans came from in your pocket was him. He's completely in control of what his father thinks because he's in control of whether or not the fox finds jelly beans magically in people's pockets.
Interesting. So you're going full mind control. I see where you're getting Little John and the snake from now.
But yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's sort of why I came to that sort of thought process.
Interesting. Okay, I'm in. So that's an interesting perspective for sure. They also make a promise, which I think is a big deal, to be available to the Reaper for honor in Pax's death. The honor, their family feels to him, given everything that Darrow did for him and everything Pax did for him. Naming the ship, it's no small feat. Everything else, he's made it a big deal. Pax is a big deal, a part of his claim at the Institute and everywhere else. Mm-hmm. So the quote is, "So if you need us, you need merely ask, and the House Telemanus will lend itself to your cause." So my question for you is, do you think that they would really lend themselves to Darrow's true cause? And obviously they've got a slightly different impression as to what Darrow's cause is in the first place.
So you mean like his true like red cause, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I know a way it could absolutely happen.
Is it the jelly beans?
It involves jelly beans, yes.
No.
We get a Ouija board, and Darrow just kind of sprinkles some jelly bean dust on the word yes, and tells them what's going on, and then lets Sophocles look at the Ouija board. Clearly, he's going to sniff yes, and Kavix will be like, yep, that's a fucking sign. We're in.
Oh, no. PJ's got full conspiracy.
You know this about me. That's absolutely what I do. Right. Like, so I love finding conspiracy theories and things.
So is that what you think would happen? Do you think that morally they'd lend themselves to the cause?
Okay, so I'm finding more and more that I really don't understand well enough the indoctrination of golds and what they think of the lower colors. So I don't think I'm really prepared to answer that question. And I think I would have been like a section ago. But I think that there's just too much sort of uncertainty around what people actually think is going on in society that I'm leaning towards more than Darrow realizes would be on his side. But also, I don't think Darrow would be so bold as to ask an entire house for help with something like that unless really backed into a corner out of fear of basically like impaling himself with this question.
Yeah, no,
I know that doesn't really answer the question, but
no, but I think it's a good call out. Like you said, like a week ago, you could have very cleanly made the call, but this week it feels very uncertain because you have two different perspectives. A week ago, you probably would have said no, all the golds are against that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But we do get like a little bit of knowledge of like Nero's kind of disgusted with Mustang because she was working with reformers. We get like the term reformer for the first time here, which is a big deal.
Democrat,
yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. By the way, I did find out the reason for that spelling. You ready for me to correct myself from like fucking 12 episodes ago?
What was that? Book 1?
Yeah, it was book 1. It was like literally chapter 1 or 2.
Okay.
Or not chapter 1 or 2, but episode 1 or 2. Democrat with a K is that way because that's how it was originally spelled in Greek or Roman.
Interesting. I guess that makes sense though.
Whichever one. But yes, so it was originally spelled that way.
Okay. Good to know.
Mm-hmm. So that's where it comes from.
What was your answer? I think you gave some bullshit answer of, I don't know, it just is. Like that.
No, I think I was talking about why it was capitalized. And I was like, it just is.
We did ask about capitalization, didn't we?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so it was more specifically about the K and the capitalization. And I was like, I don't know, the K is capitalized. And I was like, it's spelled different.
I found some miscapitalizations in this section of the book, so maybe it was a mistake anyway.
It is also the only time that happens, but I feel like it was originally done intentionally. So,
okay.
It's the only time the K is capitalized in the word. I did look through all of the text in all of the books to find that out. So that's our random catch up with previous episodes and correction bit. Yay. Okay. So, and then we finally catch up with Roke without the specter of Quinn because he specifically says he doesn't want to talk about it. And that relationship still feels very bitter.
Why wouldn't it though? There's been no resolution to anything. Like Darrow's technically apologized for drugging him and given kind of a half-assed answer of I didn't want you caught up in all of this, but like there hasn't really been a true resolution to that, which is a big fucking stain on their friendship right now. Mm-hmm. So I think it only makes sense to be tense. And on top of that, Roke, as a direct response to Darrow's actions, lost Quinn, which is the second love of his life that he's lost as a direct result to Darrow's actions, I think.
Oof. Bringing up Leah, aren't we?
Yep. Love of his life, I guess, is a little bit overstated, but, you know. Like,
I mean, for Roke, it's probably that way. I mean, it probably is overstated. Yeah, for most people.
He was like 16, so, you know.
Roke's like the poet, though, so he takes it kind of seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Self-serious about the whole thing.
I mean, think about it this way. This pain will further his poetic career. Like,
wow, is that how we want to look at the death of Quinn? Is that really what we want to sink our teeth into?
Yes. Yep. I am standing by that. Quinn's death was intentional in order to make Roke a better poet.
Oof. Aja just got like serious points for making a big deal out of that to improve the poetry long term.
Roke should really thank Aja for that. Like, he's gonna get so many book deals.
So many book deals. Because we know that books still exist.
Collection of poems.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I agree with you. I think there's no reason for him not to feel bitter. I think that the other side of this coin is also either of them could have bent towards forgiveness, but neither of them, Darrow is too preoccupied in other things to lean that way. And Roke should not necessarily be the forgiving one in this instance.
No.
He's typically been the one to go out of his way to help Darrow. You know, like he was literally going to buy him out of his servitude. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. Darrow's got to put some love into the relationship, man. Else it's all going to fall.
Yep, he does.
Yeah. Fuck.
But I think that's something he's kind of been coming to the realization of throughout this entire section, and we get into it a little bit later with Tactus, but I think he's really starting to realize that he is intentionally distancing himself from his friends as a means of not being so hurt or so clouded by emotions later on when he will ultimately be turning on everybody. And I think at the same time, he's also realizing that, like with Severo knowing and not abandoning him or not turning against him, I think he's starting to think that maybe it's not as big of a prospect to sort of enlist some of these friends for his goal.
Yeah, I think it's apt to talk about it now because I think that this is one of the many introductions that have been made over the course of the story. But the theme really here, especially in this group of chapters early on in the book and everything else, is sort of trust and like the cost of lies, you know, like it's both of those things. So Darrow not being able to trust people.
That is almost exactly the end line for the first monologue of Chernobyl.
It might be. It very well.
What is the cost of lies?
Damn it! I'm a worshiper of Craig Mazin, so it probably just came out of my mouth because I've watched that episode like 3 or 4 times.
Dude, I've watched that entire series so many fucking times. Like that is
so.
I've said it to anybody who's listened to me about it. That is my favorite piece of media ever. Is the Chernobyl miniseries. It's
damn good. Cannot disagree. Definitely up there. But yeah, so I do think that's a theme here, and I went with the cost of lies as opposed to the like price of lies or anything else. You know, what he loses by lying, because I think it makes sense, especially as like they start to talk later into the concept of basically spending his friends for his victories in a way, you know?
Yeah.
And that becomes more specific and elaborated on later with Tactus. And Roke brings it up again and is talking about it specifically, and Mustang speaks to it as well. And we've also have this through line of trust where Severo knows, and it takes all of Darrow to finally break down. Otherwise, he might get beheaded by Severo, you know? Might just kill him on the fucking spot.
There are some high fucking tensions in this society. Like, this would be exhausting. I'd really want to be a blue, I think.
Just numb and in the network.
Yeah.
That's fair. It's fair.
I think everything else sounds so exhausting.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot. I think part of that is obviously because we're inhibited from other perspectives, and we're inhabiting Darrow's perspective, which is this duality problem of secret self versus present self. So it's also that double-edged sword. So from there, we move on. We'll talk more about that theme a little bit later, but we move into chapter 28, The Storm Suns.
Yes.
Right off the bat, the picture of gravity on the moon of Europa is just fascinating at 0.136% of Earth's. You like literally having to keep themselves down and walk so lightly so as to not bounce themselves off into the stratosphere.
So that line is when he mentions like having to use his grav boots in order to sort of be in control of his walking, maybe actually understand, I think, what grav boots do, because in every other description of them, I've imagined them as like Iron Man's boots with like rockets coming off of them, so he could like go high. But if it's something more like an isolated gravitational field and like something that affects the way gravity works on whoever's wearing it, that makes so much more sense. Like thinking about later on when Severo and the Howlers are silently gliding through the air from the lake because they're wearing grav boots, like they wouldn't be silent if it was like jet thrusters. So I don't know if I'm unique in thinking that it was a lot less sort of sci-fi than it actually is, but it was kind of a cool revelation of that sort of bit of technology.
Something that I find, I totally agree with you, and I really agree with sort of the read on the grab boots, of course. I think what's really interesting is one of the like core tenets of writing a story is obviously to show, not tell, right? So you want to show what something could do as opposed to reading off a description of exactly how a bullet fires from the gun that you're looking at, right? So while one can be interesting, one is more interesting to more people, so it's the better read on how to do it and showing it in action.
I think that argument or that sort of way of thinking falls apart a little bit when you're specifically talking about technology and sci-fi.
So
because it's so different and you're dealing with alternate forms of like alternate evolutions of technology in general, you kind of need a little bit more description. Like I'll go back to the first section of Red Rising where
we all agree the first 50 pages are tough.
But specifically, I want so much more description of what a claw drill looks like as opposed to just what it does.
Yep. What I'm also saying though, PJ, is that like you can describe good things through description like this, wherein you understand where it comes from without just telling. And that's the tough part, right? Is like threading that needle and trying to figure out exactly how you manage that without just info dumping, which I would argue like the first 50 pages of Red Rising are also mostly info dumping, although not on the science of it, you know, like they're very telly and showy in two different ways, but not in the perfect or correct ways. But I agree with you. Obviously, like this does make it feel more like it's less like it's Iron Man boots and more like it's something else. The only other description that I think gets you closer to that as well so far, of course, is the proctors moving silently over the snow, and the way that the snow moved left trails, but it was like the trails were springing upwards and around something. Yeah. So it was like the snow was following or getting caught in the gravitational pull. And so they were watching that kind of moving over. I also think that these are things that you definitely catch in a more in-depth, slower read. But I think that is the toughest part of really good writing. You can do it both ways. Either ways can be very effective. The other rule of writing is that there's no rules to writing. Like you just need to you probably need to conventionally follow these rules unless you're so good that like whatever, the rules don't count for you. But that's also the trap. So I think that it does a great job. And I also think that this book in general starts to do a much better job of describing everything and upping the stakes in different ways and creating a larger, wider universe more easily.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that goes into the way that this world feels, right? With like the giant, massive waves, the storm suns, which are these people that go out. It's brilliant, brilliant storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And really left a lot of imagery in a very short period of time with the storm suns specifically.
Yeah, in particular, like they say that like when they die out there in a storm, like it's their wails that you hear, but I think it's the cries of their mothers. And that line alone is like haunting inside of that little like tale that Lorn tells. And it's so interesting because I also think it gets back to the Discordia thing that I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I also love the picture that we finally see painted of Lorn here too. Our prime or soup du jour storyteller, and kind of the full breadth of his character.
Yeah.
I really like, as you were saying earlier, we get perspective on Lorn's perspective on the society. And I like this first intro that Darrow provides. If all golds were like him, reds would still toil beneath the earth, but he would have them know their purpose. It doesn't make him good, but it makes him true.
Yeah. I think we've discussed before. I don't know for sure if we've talked about it on air. But like Lorn is Marcus Aurelius, and he is so principled about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is so true. Like he preaches what he does. Like he is what he believes in. And it's really honorable to see that sort of character that is not infallible, but true to his flaws and has reasons for his flaws, I guess.
I think what's very interesting, we've obviously mentioned Marcus Aurelius, and for those of you who don't know that much more about him, I don't want to dig into it too much. I could talk about it forever at length.
Crossland will talk about it forever.
Forever.
He has, to me, and like it's interesting and it's great, but like if you don't stop him and distract him with like, I don't know, fucking pizza or something, like he will continue on
forever and ever. So
if you ever want to get into a discussion about Stoicism or Marcus Aurelius, just
hit me on Twitter.
Just hit us on Twitter and Crossland will info dump you.
So the quote that I wanted to go back to was, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one is a core like Marcus Aurelius concept, which I think really kind of also embodies the character with which Lorn is, right? Like he doesn't just say it, he just is. And I think that's what you're trying to get to the heart of here.
Yeah.
It isn't that he just like practices what he preaches. He is a model because of what he practices.
Yeah. Other people will preach about the life of Lorn like they do about the life of Marcus Aurelius. Or about the writings of Marcus Aurelius. I have no idea what his life was like.
Right. His life was a little bit different. He was kind of, I mean, he did some other things. He wasn't entirely a piece of shit, but he is known for one of the biggest Christian genocides of all time. So,
like genocides of Christians or
genocides of Christians, yes.
Or Christian-based genocide.
No, against Christians.
Okay, because both happened.
Yeah, right. Yes, both happened. Both of them were Roman sanctioned as well, which is fascinating.
Both are Roman. You're right.
But moving forward though, with Lorn, it is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, he's a really cool character.
Yeah,
I'm liking that he's becoming more prominent.
Completely love it. So I also love the next bit here, kind of describing. We've talked about the Storm of Suns a little bit. I love the bit here that talks about Discordia. And Discordia to me, before I did the research here, said one very different thing. And Discordia to me was the world between in the Stephen King universe. Is Discordia, it's the chaos, it's everything else. And so I did research and I was like, it's got to be exactly like that. And it isn't, but it also is. Like Discordia in this context is referencing the Greek and Roman god Eris or Discordia, which is the goddess of strife or discord, also associated with the goddess of war in those mythologies as well. So war goddess, not the goddess of war. Inyo, or the Roman counterpart, Bellona, which is great to tie in there.
The Bellonas are just straight up warmongering, chaotic families, and we should be happy that we're trying to squash them. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. I think ultimately we should be happy with squishing them.
Well, yes, but
it was
from
Homer,
a moral perspective.
Well, of course, the burp's coming.
Of course, it is.
There it is. Okay, so I really love.
You once claimed to me. You've multiple times claimed to me that you can't burp.
I can't force a burp, PJ. They just happen. They're tiny. They just come up, little bubbles. Sometimes it's vomit. Those are my options.
Little bubs
or vomit. Like, if I could force a burp, I could solve a lot of problems here, PJ.
Yeah.
As I was saying, the bit about Discordia is great, and I kind of want to provide a little bit of additional context. They are the goddess of strife and discord. Discord really more meaning a sort of mischievous chaos, but still not negative. Like it's not, chaos isn't negative. It's just random. It's without sort of.
So I think that they are also the god of this application that we're using to talk to each other.
Oh, that's funny. That's extra funny. We are talking on Discord. You lose. So that was a funny joke. But yeah, so I do find it really interesting that they're kind of equated here, and we're seeing him amidst the sea of discord in which the waves are washing up, and we're seeing this old soldier who's been through war, who's been through strife, and the waves are calling and crashing, and it just all feels very, very on theme as we step into the sort of the terminology here. I think one other thing that I wanted to talk about here are to kind of lend some strength to discord in the mythology around her is all of the names or words that are associated with her children in the Roman mythos. And just to read off the words, not the names, she bore the painful sons hardship, forgetfulness, starvation, pains, battles, wars, murders, manslaughters, quarrels, lies, stories, disputes, anarchy, ruin, and oath, who most afflicts men of the earth, than willing to swear a false oath. I mean, like, it's just it's so interesting, especially the oath claim being one of the sons and daughters of Discord, wherein Arcos is totally tied to his oath to society. He had been for a very long time as the Rage Knight, especially as we learned about how he didn't realize all the wives. Well, he did. He came to realize over time all the wives that he was harming and all the damage he was doing. And it's fascinating read and well done to paint this picture of the soldier amid the sea of discordia and kind of living in between the waves constantly in the ebb and flow. And then again, getting pulled into war in his retirement. It's brilliant writing. So
yeah,
yep,
for sure. Absolutely. He is a man of his own oath, his own word. His word is his bond, whatever you want to call it. Like, yeah.
I mean, word is bond, yes, but also that word being bond, being something solid, being something unbreakable, is where oaths become dangerous, right? Where something like your oath to society can become corrupted over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the problem that he faces.
Yeah.
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 It's interesting. So thereafter, Lorn goes into a brief speech about his hands and what they've gone through, from the recent birth of his great-granddaughter to all the deaths he's caused and the lives he's stolen. Gets back to the Discordia a bit. It's kind of like, it's all poetic brutality.
Poetic brutality, sure, but also just fucking gross. Like, he goes and shows Darrow his hands that still has blood on it from his granddaughter being born the night before. Like, did he not shower in between there? Or, like, I don't know, dude, wash your fucking hands. Like, why
I think the blood wasn't still there, but he smelled it.
All right, yes, it smelled like blood. That means he didn't effectively wash his hands. We're living in a sci-fi future. They have, like... It's not medieval times where they just have like a bucket of water where they have to put their hands in, but that's also where the donkey pisses. Like, they have whatever futuristic technology replaces soap, I'm sure. Wash your fucking hands, Lorn. That's all I'm saying. Man.
Yeah, it is. I think you're right.
Sorry to rant about that a little bit. That was,
I think some soap. Some soap would go a long way.
Yeah.
Does any part of you think Darrow might be conspiring to steal Lorn's children in these moments? You know, especially since he's like placing the mines and everything else. It kind of feels like he's planning for something. But obviously, we know in the end it's something different. Do you think that there's an alternate reality where if Aja didn't show up as he thought he would, if he had to, he might abduct the children?
That thought never crossed my mind, honestly. Like,
okay.
That idea had never shown itself at all. But also, I don't think so. Because I don't think Darrow would have a way to leverage that against Lorn. Because basically, his entire point of being here is to kind of get Lorn into a position where he doesn't have a choice but to go along with Darrow, where if he were to do some sort of shenanigans where he steals his children or grandchildren, all that would really do is push Lorn into joining the fight on the side of Aja and the Sovereign as a means of retaliation and getting his family back. I don't think it's Darrow's way to take a specific person's family in, like, as hostage. Obviously, like, he's planning on taking all of the Institute's children as hostage, but I think that's more of, because it's everyone, it's not a specifically targeted hostage situation. It's more a hostage on society as it stands, as opposed to a hostage on a single person. And it's much more of a statement against society overall and less about a personal attack on a single family.
I think that it's interesting. I was just curious in terms of if you thought that he would go that far. I think you're right, though. I think the personal attack would lead to something like a blood feud.
Yeah.
But interesting nonetheless to see and like think in kind of Darrow's shoes. What would Darrow do to accomplish, his ends? Would he go that far?
Also don't think Darrow would win necessarily. Like, I don't think he'd be confident enough to do something like that and get into a physical altercation with Lorn and be confident enough to know that he'd win against him in a hand-to-hand combat.
Also fair, also true. So we also get a lot of information here from Lorn shortly thereafter. But I think one of the most interesting things is something that we kind of talked about, but also his reason to like retire and retreat from society. I left society not because it is sick, but because it is dead. The society that he stood for, everything else. We've been talking about this sort of floating gold ideology now that we have outside gold perspectives. And Lorn thought he was living, fighting, breathing for a very different society. He kind of paints colors with a sympathetic lens here too, wherein he says that they have a role in society, but now they're more like servants or slaves, right? He kind of implies that because the role of the golds has really just become filling the power vacuum as opposed to everyone contributing their part to ensure survival in the proper ways. It's become corrupted.
So we discussed Lorn being a man of his word and sort of his word being his bond and all of that. And I think this sort of line of thinking, we know he was the Rage Knight. He was an Olympic Knight, which presumably there were some very specific oaths that he took in order to uphold society and blah, 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 whatever they are. I think this sort of line of thinking is his personal justification for having given up trying to heal the society or fix it. To say that it's dead kind of gives him an out in that sense and absolves him of his duties that he vowed to uphold without breaking them. If that, like, does that make sense? I don't know if I'm articulating it well enough, but sort of saying that it's not sick, it's just dead, means that he has nothing to protect anymore, which means that he can abandon it and go live in isolation without technically violating the oaths that he made to the society. Even though he's retired and nobody would expect him to like make really grand gestures or plans or movements to defend society, he would expect that of himself if those were the vows that he made. I don't know. I felt it less bitter about society and more bitter about himself and trying his best to justify his actions and not feel bad about being in isolation and being secluded from the rest of society.
Yeah. I think that it is kind of a justification. Like you said, it's a roundabout way of him kind of coming to a conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also think that there's a bit of Lorn, I guess, to paint it into the next question here. Do you still think that he could be Ares? I know you'd posed him as a potential option earlier on, given his ideology and everything else and what we know about him. Do you still think he could be Ares?
Yes, but I think it less likely.
Okay.
Less likely that he's Ares themselves. I still think that there's potential that he's some sort of consultant for the Sons of Ares. I think that's plausible, becoming less and less likely as I think about it, but also not necessarily. I don't have a reason to believe it, but I don't have a reason not to believe it at this point either, because I'm sure that there's a way where him believing that society is dead and he has nothing to uphold anymore anyway means that he could completely sort of act in a way that he thinks would most benefit the society as it stands, which, based on how he's thinking and talking, could very well be an uprising and an overturn of gold rule.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't heard enough to support it from him yet. Like, I'd like to see a little bit more hostility from him towards the way golds treat the lower colors, which he hasn't really touched on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's unlikely.
It's unsure. I'm unsure at this point. I am holding him as a possibility, especially because of his interactions with Darrow before. Like, what made me believe it before, that he was the one that gave the ring to the was it to Fitchner? I think it was to Fitchner.
Yep. Which actually he also talks about.
But also that gives some implications of, did Fitchner have any sort of inkling that he was being looked at as the Rage Knight at that point if he was interacting with Lorn? Or is that simply because that they were both part of House Mars? And
I think it's just a part of them both being a part of House Mars. Okay. I don't think it's much more than that.
I don't know. I'm trying to find things to read into. Crossland, stop squashing my shit.
Well, some of it's obvious. Some of it is to be read into.
Yeah.
I mean, you're allowed to read into whatever you like. I just feel like the text leaves it, obviously. That's not to say there aren't additional things, but I'm never going to try to spoil for you.
Yeah.
That's the aim. So the next story he tells after that is the story of House Silas, which is an honestly brutal recollection of why the Bologna-Augustan feud has gone on for so long. We finally get an answer as to what happened to Nero's first wife. He married into the Bologna family after the Bologna family and House Silas agreed to purge all but Nero from the bloodline. So it was only Nero.
Yeah, that was short-sighted. Like,
well,
that didn't end well for him. Like,
yes, Nero, we also find out, is an iron gold. The family Augustus are iron golds because they are the original golds left from the conquering. They have a bloodline that runs from there. And so with that in mind, it definitely was an oversight, but it seemed like the right thing to do because they didn't want to eliminate such a noble house. So they marry into the Bologna family in Iona Bologna, which
is a fucking hilarious name.
Oh, no. It's like a prank name.
That's like a name that shows up on an Oscar Mayer commercial.
Yeah. No joke. No joke. It's a whole thing in my head.
Iona Bologna, spelled Bellona.
Okay, so moving back to it though, Iona Bologna gets married to Iona Bologna after the near extinction of House Augustus, like we talked about. So Iona Bologna marries Nero, right, and is married to Nero in this great celebration. And later that night, he has a package sent to the house of the Bolognas, of which Julius Al Bologna opens it up and finds the head of his daughter stuffed with grapes.
Her mouth
at which
is
point,
stuffed with grapes.
Well, right, mouth stuffed with
which
her head is. It's a portion of her head.
That makes it sound like he dug out her brains and filled it with grapes, which could have happened and would be fucking brutal. And I'm in for it. But I don't think that's what it was. That's in response to the fact that he was treated well by his family's murderers and giving grapes because there was no water to keep them hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
Which, first of all, what? Why? Was it fires? I think it was fires.
Mm-hmm.
But also, why the grape? Look, why is that the thing that you hold on to? And
it just is the thing that he held on to.
Yeah. I don't know.
I also see this as a perfect cinematic flashback.
Oh,
for the
God.
record.
It's great. It's amazing.
It's great. Yeah.
It's so good.
This is an episode in and of itself.
No, not an episode, but a good chunk
20
of an
minutes.
episode.
Yeah.
A 20-minute chunk of like the middle or even like the first.
I'd say the intro. Like you do
the intro.
cold open into this.
Yeah. You'd have to end on some sort of cliffhanger of, I don't know, Lorn saying something. Like Lorn saying whatever, what was the term? Like, I don't know, like, you don't know who your master is or something like that.
Yes,
like the right. Cliffhanger, like the end line of the
clincher moment. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. So I think that to wrap up this bit on House Silas and everything else, the House of Silas is then eliminated with Lorn, with Octavia planning and plotting to place Nero, obviously, as the Archgovernor. At this point, Octavia wasn't yet the sovereign, but was the daughter, obviously, of the sovereign 5 years before the overthrow. And it's a fantastic illustration of both sort of Lorn's indifference and oath to the society and how he's willing to kind of uphold those things. And it's just so fucking good. Like, this is so good inside of the story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's God, we just talked about cinematography, but like it is one of the most cinematic like pieces of storytelling within the book so far. Like I can very happily, clearly imagine what this adaptation would look like in basically any way you cut it. It's kind of got to be done in a very specific way that is basically take it straight from the book and plop it on the screen because it's that well done.
Mm-hmm. You could literally just carve this out and put it on. I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
God, it's so good. So another Easter egg, which I want to bring up here, which is kind of maybe an obscure one. When I was doing my research, generally I'm able to find some of the Easter eggs that people have caught on the Red Rising wiki or a number of other forums and stuff like that. And this is one that hasn't been recorded anywhere, so I'm excited. So the Easter egg is Lorn is talking about when Cassius and Darrow were dueling at the gala in the Bleeding Place, in which he talks about the Orencius Folly, which is obviously a 3-move set inside of Cravat, but it's named after a character from Dungeons and Dragons / Baldur's Gate named Orencius, and it is a character from BG2. He's a sorcerer, and I just remembered randomly. I was like, I feel like I've heard that name before, and I googled it, and then I found out that it was here. I was like, I think that has to be intentional. I think it has to be. So, anyway, included that here.
Shut up, nerd. I've been wanting to get into Baldur's Gate, so that might be
the new game
thing that pushes me into it.
I mean, it's just Dungeons and Dragons in different scenarios.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's exactly what I want.
Right. Not saying it's a bad thing. Lorn ends up showing also that he wasn't deceiving Darrow, but lets him in on the trap he's walked into. You know, it's kind of a genuine show of character this whole time. He's been leading him through these conversations. He's aware of the chip in Darrow's ear as well, so that all the people elsewhere understand. Mm-hmm. And he's willing to literally risk his family so as to save Darrow and try to get him off the planet, even though it'll kill all of Darrow's friends because he cares about him so much. I
don't know if that's risking his family at all.
It is ultimately risking his family. Would Aja not go carve through his family?
No, I don't think he would.
I think at the very least they would be held, but
Octavia
it's something.
But does anyway. Spoiler.
Yes. So right, but also like there was the threat of like Darrow talked about it too. Like she'll just come and glass the planet. Like you are going to you're going to be extinguished either way.
Yes, but it gets into sort of his decision making later, where he still tries to stand like House Arcos stands apart. Is after this, like he is not trying to involve himself at all, and I think genuinely believes that if he does not involve himself in this conflict, he will have no consequences, which would include his family. I think.
I don't think that's how this is read. I think he's willing to accept minor lashings for Darrow's singular escape.
The way he was so passionate about his grandchildren later on makes me believe that he never thought them expendable at all.
All right, so here's a note. I think we will have to pick this up after this because I think that we have a thing to talk about in between here, which is the same reason that Darrow wouldn't kill Aja. So we move into chapter 29, Old Man's Wrath. And man, you can kind of feel the torture in Lorn here as he's talking through not wanting to be a part of this war. After we finally get to know him, he's like, I don't want to be on Aja's side. I don't want to be on Darrow's side. Because Aja shows up with her Praetorian guard. And, it's dramatic. It's different. It's stressful. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We also see Tactus show up.
That dick.
Fuck Tactus, right?
Yep.
Just kidding. I miss him. Aja and Tactus face down the Howlers as well, who were called in at the end of the last chapter in, genuine fashion of Pierce Brown, wherein we get all excited for the battle that's going to happen in the next chapter, which is great. But yeah, so they kind of draw up, including the new recruits, which Severo held tryouts for, apparently, which is interesting, right? It's kind of funny.
I want more of that. I want to see exactly how that played out, because that sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah, I feel like that's a quick cutaway, kind of Guy Ritchie style, where you just like shoot to it, and like you see like them like doing mushrooms and doing a bunch of shit, and like shoving a snake down their throat or something, and then you cut back real quick without like a full explanation. But it'd be just enough to tease it the right way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it would be good. It's so interesting because Lorn wants so nothing to do with this, and we also eventually at the end of the scene, Darrow truly lets Aja go, despite that being maybe in the best interest of helping Roke and maybe for other reasons, but because he knows that that'll win Lorn's allegiance. And I think that that's another reason to go into the sort of kid scenario where if he didn't have to worry about Lorn doing the right thing, I don't know. I feel like that those two things play together.
Yeah.
Because he's treating their children, right? So like he treats Darrow like one of his children. And that's the reason that he's willing to expend that much energy to allow for him to escape.
Almost though.
Yeah, I'd say like 95% he's got the same respect.
But the same amount probably goes towards Aja.
Right, which is exactly why he's not killing either of them. He's doing his best to stay in the middle, but he is also, I ultimately think he's not sacrificing his grandchildren here, but he's maybe risking them in a capacity. It might not be Aja who kills them. It is Octavia, like you said, but it would be, I think he's definitely taking a risk, letting Darrow off the hook.
I think he is, but a calculated one. I don't think he truly believes that Darrow would do anything to harm his grandchildren.
Well, no. It's not Darrow who's going to harm the grandchildren. It's Darrow escaping and then Octavia taking alms with that and being angry and coming back for Lorn's grandchildren.
So
outside of Lysander, because Lysander is her heir.
Yeah.
I guess that's more my point.
It's a really tough call.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's a little bit more complex, but I feel like he is making the best call that he can in his situation to preserve all parties.
I think
Lorn.
The fact that he hid the children and everybody in the separate wing in the hidden trapdoor bookshelf, the fact that he hid everybody until Darrow was gone, as far as the intents go, tells me that he probably didn't actually want to be involved in this at all anyway. And he didn't have a choice in that. He didn't have a choice in being involved or being approached. So he's working with what he's got, and this is minimalizing any risk towards his family.
Definitely. Yep.
So I don't think he's actively choosing to risk his family for any sort of.
Well, I feel like you said, he's minimizing risk. I think there's still inherent risk in his decision.
I think given
Darrow.
Given a choice, I don't think he'd be involved at all.
Right,
to eliminate
but he was involved.
Risk.
Correct, because he
didn't have a choice. He didn't have a choice to be involved.
Yes. If he had a choice, he would choose not to be involved, but instead he's directly involved by his two students. Yep, which is pretty much the worst. He tries to choose to save them both, right? So, moving forward, the description of the explosion of the Praetorians, right, because Darrow had dropped the mines earlier, is just fucking beautiful, right? So, the bomb goes off, they fly into the air, body parts everywhere. A second bomb goes off where the gravity pulls them back down. Then a third bomb absolutely eviscerates them into bits.
This is science fiction technology description that I want in general.
Yeah, so it's like in action.
It's in action. It doesn't go into necessarily the mechanics of how a gravity well explosion works, but it's enough to tell you like the process of what happens without leaving you wanting for more necessarily, but just the monologue of the description of how the tiered explosions work of concussive, gravity, kinetics, and then raining body parts. And the breaking of the it's not a jam field, but I imagined it like a jam field. It was more of like a physical jam field that was keeping the rain at bay.
Yeah. Bubble something. Bubble field, maybe?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
But the kinetic blast breaking it open and suddenly like rain falling. It set the mood.
And then Aja and Tactus realize what's going on and they run away, of course. You know, Tactus being partially caught in the explosion. They get launched through the doors. They attempt an escape. There are only 3 Praetorians remaining. Darrow waits a bit before sicking the wolves on them. Because we find out later the reason he waited, despite Roke's pleading, was because he wanted to ensure that Aja got away. Mm-hmm. And potentially Tactus, but Tactus ultimately didn't, of course. So that was a consideration and whatnot. But
which I think makes total sense. I think it makes total sense that he allowed Aja to get away, and that's like something that he's like is being questioned from here to the end of the section. But I don't think there's any sort of world, any sort of scenario where Aja dies and Lorn agrees to go with him because of what we just talked about, how Lorn is very emotionally attached to his students like family and wants to see both survive, even though they're at odds with each other. So allowing Aja to escape, 1, gets Lorn on his side, but 2, maybe in sort of a long game play, gives a sense of fallibility to him and maybe gets Octavia to underestimate him a little bit in the future.
I think you're right. I think that it plays in all hands correctly, right? He's
except for his allies.
Correct. For his allies, it feels like he's burning them. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this only really comes to light later, in chapter 32 when we finally have kind of the discussion of him intentionally letting them go. But I definitely am right there with you. So after the explosion and the escape of Aja, we find Tactus holed up with the kids of House Argos. The scene up to that, by the way, of them like crawling around and like racing around the castle, like pulling themselves around corners as they're floating because of how light the gravity is just insane to think about. Like, it's awesome. It's just so cool.
You would think that there'd be some sort of technology that would simulate a standard either Earth-like or Mars-like gravity in specific buildings.
So we know that there is on spaceships, but maybe Lorn is specifically selective about it. We learned a little bit about his childhood where he was actually raised out on the moons with very little here too. So it could be just him wanting to instill those same kind of values of this sort of rim culture. So yeah, no, I agree with you though. I think that you would think that exists, and I do think it exists in other places. I think we specifically see it on Loon, but yeah. Yeah, so he obviously chooses not to, but that makes this a very interesting kind of cinematic moment. But we do finally get down into the depths of the dungeon, and we find Tactus there with the kids of House Arcos, and that scene is just so fucking stressful. The tension created with that hostage situation that Pierce Brown makes rivals entire films about hostage situations. It's so much.
Yeah. So entire films about hostage situations. The first one that comes to mind is one that I watched in your
3-2-1 phone booth.
Phone booth. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love that movie, and I haven't watched it since then. Like I think we watched it twice in one night in your parents' basement.
I think it was twice in a week, but I definitely agree.
Yeah. Either way, it was still like in very quick succession. And I haven't seen it since then because there was nowhere that was streaming it. I should look again.
I own it. I bought it.
Yeah.
Because it's so good.
I probably should. I love that movie. But at the same time, I don't know if I entirely agree with you. It's really good sort of setup writing, but the actual confrontation that happens seems a little bit... I think the best way to describe it's a tough description, but it's a little bit anime.
You said that specifically in reference to the face turnaround, though, right? Like specifically that. I'm talking about the tension getting down in there.
Just the entire thing of Tactus standing with his back to Darrow and having this entire full-blown conversation, and towards the end starting to like look a little bit and give hints of what's happening to his face. Like that's not how people talk. It's just not realistic, I feel like. And it felt really sort of theatrical for the sake of being theatrical. That said, the conversation itself and the things happening around them felt awesome. But the only sort of complaint I have is the fact that he was like a supervillain, cornered, standing with his back turned and having a full-blown fucking conversation. Which, first of all, if you were in that situation, would you just not look at the person coming towards you, knowing how capable they are?
I mean, yeah, so you said supervillain. When you started to describe it that way, the first thing I thought about is the hostage situation with Two-Face, right, in The Dark Knight, of which immediately harkened to me, that moment with Harvey Dent and Aaron Eckhart.
Same deal.
I also, it doesn't feel that different of a scenario to me in my head. Like, it feels like a very similar scenario.
It is.
And actually, the more that I think about that, it kind of feels lifted.
I have the same problems with that scene.
Oh, man, I don't have any problems with that scene, but that's okay. I get it. Okay. That's just a difference of opinion. That's cool. I feel very stressed out inside of those moments. It does. I definitely get where you're coming from, though, where it can feel like a little bit comic booky. As you said it, I stepped away from the anime description.
Comic booky is probably the better way to describe it.
Like, as you're looking at the panels and they're away and you're like reading through the panels, and the fourth panel's the reveal. Yeah.
It's not that I have any sort of problem with anime or with comic books or anything like that. It's just that if I were to try to see this as a realistic thing, that those sort of theatrics I don't think play in the same way that they do either in anime or in a comic book.
I don't think that cheapens anything that's going on, though, because Tactus himself is so attached to his identity and his beauty and his belief in himself as this fucking pixie, right? Because he's been bullied for so long, and he's maintained that his image is so important that, he kind of sits and lingers and lives in that space. So he's obviously, when his face is fucked up, it's a big deal to him.
Good point.
And also Tactus kind of gets back to the theme that the book is centered on frequently, where he starts to like break down, where it's, Darrow's hiding the truth from his friends. And that's why like he was pulled by the void power that kind of we talked about previously to go with Octavia. But in reality, he just felt alienated. He felt like an outsider, even inside of his inner circle. He didn't feel like he was included. And so that totally made him feel off. Mm-hmm. Pushed him away.
Which, I mean, obviously Darrow feels bad about that, and I think we'll see him make sort of a more conscious effort to make all of his close friends feel like close friends. But at the same time, I think it gives him a little bit of hope that these people are people and have emotional connections, and those emotional connections can drive them to things that they would normally decry. Mm-hmm. So I think this, despite the tragedy, will kind of give him some confidence. Like there's the comment on if Tactus can change, then gold can change. It gives him sort of hope for his cause, and hope that his cause doesn't have to be fought for alone. That he can recruit allies from the gold ranks. He already has Severo, obviously, but maybe it'll give him a little bit more confidence to approach people and be more open with who he is. Selectively, obviously, but maybe with a little bit more confidence. I don't know.
You would hope so. You would hope that would be the moral or message that he would take from this. So Tactus apologizes, sobbing and upset about his actions. We get more background. We'd obviously known previously about his brothers being abusive and whatnot to him, but we get kind of that sort of familial disconnect. I'm not saying abusive in terms of the, like physically or whatever, but I just mean like they were generally degrading towards him in a very negative context, as was everyone else in society, kind of just bearing down on him, forcing him into this image, just like the thing with the violin and laughing at him and kind of calling him and thinking him this weak thing. And it created him into this kind of cruel form of person that he didn't want to be. And he kind of cries to Darrow saying like, I don't want to be like this. This isn't who I want to be. And Darrow kind of comes around to it and says, if Tactus can change, gold can change. They must be broken, but then they must be given a chance. I think that's what Io would have wanted in the end. So great.
It is. And it's a turning point. This clearly just is what I was just talking about. It bleeds into exactly what I was just saying, but he is learning a lot more about who the average gold is, as opposed to who the really, like, publicly speaking, high profile golds are. Like, that's not who Gold Society is. And even with that, he's dealing with different sort of ranks within the Peerless Scarred, which are, as we talked about a couple episodes ago, like 0.3% of Gold Society as a whole. Even when talking about that small of a sample size, which are the elite of the elite, he's seeing that sort of gradient of thought, of belief, of understanding what golds are and what they should be. And I think he'd see an even more drastic gradient if he were to talk to non-peerless.
Yeah, I think that's especially important to point out in relation to, Tactus, because he is arguably the sort of summarily average gold, like what we expect gold to be. He's kind of as literally mentioned, he is like the picture perfect.
Picture perfect. That's the right word.
Yeah.
Not average, but prototype. I think prototypical, like what gold should strive to be.
Right.
As opposed to just kind of the Joe Schmo gold.
Correct. So thereafter, Tactus finally gives up, after this conversation and everything, drops his razor and surrenders, obviously, to Darrow and Lorn. The kids start to file out. They're happy. They're excited. They get to live another day, of course, and they're not about to get cut down. It's a good news for them. And Tactus continues to kind of talk with Darrow a little bit. Lorn comes out of this and says, after everyone has left the room except for Darrow, Tactus, and Lorn, now that the children have gone, consequences. And he fucking stabs him in the armpit near the heart 4 times, drops the dagger, and walks out of the room.
So my initial thought on this was, what did Tactus do to really wrong Lorn here? Like, what actions is he receiving consequences for? But there's Lysander being his grandson, which is a big fucking deal, obviously. And also just the fact that he was on the strike force making its way towards killing his grandchildren. Even though he didn't do it, it was still an intent. So I guess it makes sense. But I think there could be a very valid argument that Tactus didn't actually do much of anything to wrong Lorn in general. Because it could be argued that him taking Lysander and jumping out and returning him to Octavia, essentially, is taking Lysander out of a hostage situation and bringing him back home. And I think Lorn, more than anybody, should realize that he's going to sometimes get instructions that are against his own personal code of morality. And the fact that he stopped and didn't go through with killing anybody in that situation could be seen as a positive in that situation. So like I would like to uphold an argument, maybe not that I necessarily believe in, but that I think is a very valid argument, that Tactus didn't actually do anything that should have provoked a retaliation from Lorn.
So I see where you're coming from, or the argument that you're making.
And like this is more of a devil's advocate argument. Like I understand Lorn's position, but
I guess the other part of it is like just boiling it down to as close as we can get to actual reality. If you and I think this also goes kind of in favor to the argument to some degree, but I think it's a good sort of summation of the situation. If you walked in on someone who had your kids or your family at gunpoint and then talked them down, they drop the gun, they walk out of the room, do you resolve that it's just okay then? And specifically, if you're a soldier, do you not just kill the fuck out of them? Because I think if you're a soldier, you probably just kill the fuck out of them.
Right. But if you already know that they are strictly following orders, and if they were like truly true to the orders being given, they wouldn't have paused. They wouldn't have been just standing there waiting.
I mean, morally compromised people. Yeah, but morally compromised people, like people that feel morally compromised in whatever they're doing, sometimes take time to like make those decisions. That's why you get the shaky hand in the hostage situation, right?
You do. But also, Lorn was an Olympic Knight. And we know from our previous conversations that the Olympic Knights, while they are hypothetically there to protect society and uphold the rules of society, are really kind of at the whim of the sovereign. So I'm sure Lorn...
But he's not an Olympic Knight.
He was.
Right. Lorn was. I guess I was speaking to Tactus.
No, he's not. But I feel like an Olympic Knight is kind of the pinnacle position where this can be applied, where he has to follow orders regardless of what he believes in, personally. So I think, from Lorn's perspective, I think it could be easily argued that Tactus maybe acted in defiance of the sovereign by not immediately going through with his orders. So
I definitely like the reasoning.
But also, if that's the case, that could be the consequences that Lorn's talking about. Like, this is a man who does not have scruples. Like, he doesn't go through with his orders, but also his individual thoughts are maybe a little bit misaligned. So, like, where's the redemption there? Like,
I think there's definitely an argument on the other side for like Lorn killing him because he sees that he's so fallible. You know,
there's
like, okay,
there's arguments on, I think, all four sides that I've kind of laid out. I don't know, 3 or 4. It's definitely not one or the other. It's not us versus them.
Right. Darrow thinks he's reclaimable. You know, obviously, it's kind of again the sort of what I think is really interesting is we're put into this position of Lorn being in a situation where he wants to be the one out of the situation between Aja and Darrow, and then we have Tactus who wants to be out of his situation where he's indebted to Aja with 2 other perspectives bearing against him within the same chapter. It's interesting. Lorn kind of screaming and claiming his freedom and taking action to claim his freedom.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, this absolves him from being indebted to Darrow for saving his family.
I don't know if that's true. Well, maybe indebted, but I think Lorn still chooses. Maybe Lorn still chooses though to. Are you saying Lorn is indebted to Darrow?
By taking
by
action,
killing Tactus.
He is not indebted to Darrow for diffusing the situation and deposing of the threat that is Tactus.
Darrow still did diffuse the situation.
But
yeah,
like I said before, it's all about actions and justification of like word of law or word of morality, as opposed to actual like intention of morality. Rules as written versus rules as intended. Like I said, maybe last episode, 2 episodes ago, whatever it was. I think Lorn is a very much rules as written kind of person, and whatever loopholes he can find to justify his own morality and justify his own actions and satisfy his own morality, I think is the right way to put it. He'll take, but he won't break the rules, and he won't oppose his own morality. So,
chapter 30. We've got 2 shorter chapters, and then one that we have a little bit more to talk about. But the Gathering Storm is pretty funny. It's a good chapter. It's a good way to kind of lift the mood right after this. We go back to Kavix, and he is kind of this wily old man, and I love it. His haggle, what a haggle! Sometimes a man needs a good haggle. Line about like the ships that they claimed is just so good.
I mean, effectively, Darrow didn't say anything. He said almost nothing within that haggle. Mm-hmm. They haggled against themselves.
Right.
It's but all also jest. Landed exactly where Daxo initially set forth. 50% finder's fee, marked down to 30% for like friendship, and then it went down to 10, and then
because Cavax
up to 20,
and then up to
from 30. Darrow, and then up to 30 from Daxo, and settled on that. Like it went nowhere.
Right, but it's just funny.
Fucking hilarious. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's just good writing on the side of Pierce on Kavix and Daxo. I think it's character building for the 3 of them, and it's great.
But the coolest, I think not the coolest, but the most sort of meaningful conversation here, I think, is that of Ragnar taking command, which I'm sure you have a question about.
Yes, yeah. So that actually is the next question. So Darrow also gets his connections with some like low color friends. His conversation, kind of reemerges with Orion and Ragnar and what was going on with them. Ragnar specifically is maybe the most interesting because he kind of asks the question of Kavax, like, could we put Ragnar in charge of squads? When someone else isn't available to lead, and they kind of go, what?
Well, they're like, why would that situation exist in the first place? And Orion mentions that he overstepped, but I think that Darrow could have done more to justify what he was saying, like a covert strike team into the Sovereign's palace of Obsidians and Greys, led by Ragnar. In the open, covert, but in the open, that's not something anybody gold could have done or could do, but would be super valuable and super useful to their situation. So, like, he hinted on it, saying, like, we could send him in somewhere that golds couldn't go. And, like, there is no such place. But clearly there is. And he didn't push the matter. And I think if he would have done that succinctly enough, I think it could have worked really well for him. But ultimately, I think the fact that he stopped there was probably for the best. He's better at reading the room than I am.
Totally fair. So I do agree with you in terms of Ragnar and his thoughts on that, and just like deciding to withdraw the sort of mention. He was like, well, it was an idea. And then just sort of like lets it go. Mm-hmm. And then we move into the next chapter, which is...
So I'm curious, though, because they basically, like, the Telemonuses basically walk away at that point after he kind of gives up on what he was saying. I'm curious if that's going to come back to bite him a little bit. And also, going back to your previous question about the Telemonuses giving aid to Darrow's true goals, I think that kind of squashes that idea a little bit, because it kind of shows how entrenched they are in the idea of gold rule, at least from Darrow's point of view.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it is kind of that, can they break from the notion of the, Pax Solaris, the whole compact, and how willing are they to do so? I agree with you. I think that's interesting. It does kind of paint them into the sort of questionable corner. So we move into chapter 31, Coop, which is another real quick, or coup. I said Coop. Coup. It's coup. I know it's coup. My brain said Coop. It's coup. It's a stupid fucking word, though. Let the record show it's stupid.
I'm sending you to the Marine Corps.
Shut the fuck up. So I like
Colonel Sanders wants you at his chicken place.
Yeah, try to say lieutenant for me.
No.
Because that doesn't work. Anyway, the attempt at stealing the children from the institutes and the academies has failed. Mustang's forces were caught in a similar spiral from Pliny, very similarly to the way that Darrow was surprised, seeking to do damage to the cause so that he might live a longer life and become the arch-governor of Mars. But Mustang, in the end, took his eye for good measure, which is great. Love it. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty much defines this chapter.
Pretty much.
For the most part.
There's not a whole ton to it.
This
Pliny's a garbage human. Like, he's a garbage. He is a dumpster. I just like that his eyeball's gone now.
Yeah, one less eyeball is how very Severo of you.
Though, does it explicitly say that he is still alive at any point in this or the next chapter? All she says is she took his eye. Severo says that he looks forward to completing the set, but it's not mentioned that he's still alive, I think.
Heavily implied that he's still alive because he's still plotting and he's sending stuff after them and everything else. So I think that it's, yes, I don't think it's a question that he's alive. She took his eye for good measure, but that didn't kill him. I'm pretty
then
sure
why
that's
wouldn't
the
she
line.
just kill him there?
Because she probably couldn't.
How could, in what situation is she able to take his eyeball, a whole goddamn eyeball, and not kill him?
Same thing happened to Severo in book 1, man. Jumped off cliff, escaped somehow, jumped away.
That was not like his eyeball was stolen. His eyeball was cut and rendered useless, right?
No, his eye was gouged out of his face. Yeah. Just getting to the point, though.
I'm having trouble imagining a situation where Mustang is able to take his eye and not able to just fucking kill him.
I can very cleanly imagine her grabbing into someone's face, yanking out their eye, them screaming in pain, guards stepping up, Pliny walking backwards and shuffling out of the room in pain after proposing that she be his strange bride, her eventually breaking out of those bonds and escaping on a runaway ship. That is an episode of TV written for you by myself right here, right now.
I hate you. You're right.
That is exactly how that happens. He didn't need to say it because it's so like typical. It is the way that I described it is typical, but it's so like it's classic to a degree. I think that's part of what I like about Pierce Brown's writing so much too, is that the tropes exist because the tropes exist. He doesn't explicitly linger on the tropes, but you can kind of assume that tropes fill in the missing lines,
Yeah.
It's kind of genius in that way. Yeah. I got you there.
I just want him dead.
Right. Soon. Maybe. I don't know. Hopefully. Severo is going to collect the set, right? So there's barely anything more to talk about in this chapter. There are 2 more points that I think are worth mentioning. Darrow deciding to send Pliny on the wild goose chase from Scythers. The Oranges plan is a great plan, especially considering the thing that Mustang flew in on is likely being tracked or irradiated in some way to be tracked. So absolutely ship it out the back or ship out whatever you can on the back of a probe. Send it in the wrong direction, mislead them, is a great plan. And then I also really like, obviously, the entire scene is really centered around the eyeball that's dropped onto the floor and Darrow staring at it for a bit, kind of unnerved. Severo later being like, can I have it? It's just great.
It's awesome. But also solidifies it makes me wonder how many gold rulers are willing to hear out the ideas of oranges about their ships. Like, gold seems so arrogant and know-it-all. Like, I wonder how many times something like that has actually happened.
Darrow's starting to come up very democratic in the eyes of maybe other golds who are paying attention, you know?
No, he's not democratic. He said so.
Well, he said so.
Why would he say something otherwise? Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, there's already suspicions from Augustus and voice communications to prove it or to back up those claims. So,
yeah,
I think that's going to be part of his downfall going forward. It's going to be something hindering his forward motion is his compassion towards lower colors.
Okay. Interesting. On to chapter 22, our final chapter here, Die Young. And this chapter is really just kind of meeting and talking with the praetors that are under Darrow at the moment, trying to figure out their best way out of the situation that they're in. I find it interesting right off the bat in this chapter. Perhaps in some other life where men like Lorn don't exist, Tactus would have lived. But Darrow is a man like Lorn, self-described as like him, and described by Lorn as like him, that being the reason that he took him up as a student. So I feel like that also leads us to an end where Tactus, no matter what, doesn't exist. And I think that also gets into kind of the theme of the chapter that is spoken of, where friends are kind of sacrificed and homonym for Darrow's goals.
So yes, I think Darrow is very much like Lorn in some respects. But I think the respect that's important to this specific sort of line of actions and line of thoughts is his unrelenting personal morals and just inflexible ideas about morality and what actions require what consequences and things like that. Darrow is very clearly much more forgiving about things, which hypothetically would make him not like Lorn in that sense. So it would take a little bit more context to understand what Darrow is meaning when he says people like Lorn. But I think it could be argued that in this context, Darrow is trying to separate himself from Lorn's personality. And I think the argument is valid.
I don't know that he's trying to separate himself. I really think that I'm trying to get to, I think that there's some irony here. That
There's absolutely irony.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to say that there's not.
I don't think Darrow's separating himself in any way, shape, or form, though, because in reality, he still continues to choose these things, right?
Yeah, but we've also, we've been able to see those differences.
Yeah, I guess, are we also letting ourselves excuse the rationality for the judgment of the moment, Like this was happening, Darrow lost a friend, this was happening, Darrow lost a friend. But Darrow's compacted choices as they went forward have just made it more likely that these things are going to happen, which is not unlike Lorn, I think. I feel like that's the read that I get out of it, but I feel like that is
he could also just be saying, if people like Lorn and myself didn't exist, Tactus would still be alive.
Yes, yeah.
It could be self-pity.
I don't think he's so self-aware that he's making that comment. That's where I'm making that comment, filling in the gap, where it's like, I don't think he's not self-aware enough to come to that conclusion.
He's already come to the conclusion, though. He's already made comments about how Lorn took him in as a student because Lorn saw him as being like him.
Yes, right. What I'm getting to, PJ, though, is that I think that specifically Lorn and Darrow see each other like there's an equal sign between the two of them, right? But Darrow isn't actually self-aware enough to see himself as Lorn. He isn't willing to admit that he's like Lorn, but Lorn knows that Darrow is like him. So Darrow is unwilling to admit that he actually is a copy of Lorn at this point, but he's citing Lorn as though he is this copy, this crystalline image of him. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's a lot from both of ours, from both of our perspectives. It's a lot of speculation, and I don't think there's really much textual evidence either way.
Oh no, this is much more of a thematic discussion than it is a textual discussion.
Right.
The textual discussion, though, shows that Lorn thinks that Darrow is like him.
We know that for sure.
Took him up. Yep, right. I'm saying that's textual.
Yep. It's just whether or not Darrow explicitly thinks himself like Lorn.
Right.
Which I feel like there were thoughts about that. I feel like there were internal monologues about that, but I can't recall them off the top of my head at this point.
Yeah, I feel like they tread the line, but it's not strictly there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting analysis because I think no matter what, Tactus would have died, and I think that like Roke says later, or like Mustang and Roke both say later, it's when are the bodies going to stop piling up? So everything costs something to Darrow. Perhaps soon you'll tire of making your friends pay is the line that literally comes on the next page, which is, like if we think about it, Leah, Quinn, any other number of people kind of being in the way, Pax, like friends continue to pay and sacrifice for him. And now we add Tactus to the body count. I can't imagine a better way to put that. Good work, Roke.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I really think that the story of the Stradivarius, which it's written as Stradivarian, is interesting. We did a little bit of searching and research beforehand in terms of the plurals.
I think it's just an error.
Yeah, I think it's just a plurality kind of thing, and it's not that big of a deal at all. But I really think that it's remarkable much.
But it's not written as plural. It's written as singular. The Stradivarian is how it's written. So
yes, it's like a past. It's not past participle.
No. So my only thought, if it were technically correct, there is if it was some sort of attribution towards the violin. It is Stradivarian in nature. Like that. Sure. That's the only way I can really justify that being the correct thing. I think it's just kind of an oversight. Which is fine. I grew up playing the cello. I'm a little bit of an orchestra nerd in that sense. But it didn't. It did. I did notice it, but it didn't really bother me that much. One, because it's a sci-fi novel and not like historical fiction. So there's sort of the suspension of disbelief in that in this universe, maybe it's a slightly different sort of deal. But
yeah, I think textually it's not. But I agree with you on the attribute, being it's similar to a Stradivarian, or it is a being an attribute of the violin. I feel like that is the cleanest read. I also don't think it's that big of a deal.
It's not.
It is earlier referred to as a right. It's earlier referred to as a Stradivarius. So it's just interesting here that it's referred to as Stradivarian. But it's remarkable how much like Pierce makes you miss Tactus here in like these two paragraphs. It's evident that he was trying to change, that there was something else here. I really feel like the sort of conversation that evolves out of this too is one of the sort of dangerous masculinity identity thing, right? Like being like so unable to talk, like the very dangerous, like the being so unable to talk about your feelings at all and hiding them and repressing them, that you're never truly understood and no one ever tries to understand you. And you bury that to such a degree in which you literally end up in a situation where you get murdered because you took people hostage, but he didn't. He is.
Well, he kind of did. No, he didn't. He didn't take anybody hostage. He
took the kids hostage.
He returned a hostage, and then he went into the same room as some hiding children. He didn't do anything to actually take anyone hostage other than being present.
PJ, he was taking the kids hostage just by threatening them.
He didn't do
with
it
his razor, and he killed 3 people on the stairs.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, he was 100% taking them hostage.
They were just grays and obsidians, though. They didn't really fucking matter.
The people who died. Okay. Yeah. I don't think there's any read on this situation where it's not a hostage situation. No. It's not a
hostage situation because he didn't have them as hostages, though. And he wasn't in a position to, like, negotiate.
He very much was in a position to negotiate. And instead of even entering negotiations, because his emotional state... But the negotiation
was for his own life. It wasn't for the lives of everybody else. Like, clearly he wasn't in control of the room.
No, but he gave up the room. He would have killed half of them with a single swing, as it's described on the page.
Yeah, but he didn't.
It is a hostage situation. There's no question. With his razor out. That's like saying, I was just pointing a machine gun at children. Like,
I think you should be allowed to do that without being questioned.
Yeah, okay. Jesus. No, there's no way.
No,
that's not a hostage situation. There's no way that's not a hostage situation.
Yes. I think it would, in almost every scenario, be classified as a hostage situation. But looking at it from his point of view, I don't think he was ever in a position personally where he was going to go through with it.
Oh, I think 100% he would have. Okay. I don't think there's a situation where he would have gone through with it because I think that Tactus is an amendable, emotional person.
Yeah.
But he still sat himself in a situation in which he held them hostage because he was listening to Octavia the Sovereign's orders. So that's sort of the gap that I get is he had orders. He followed them up until a point. And the point was where he was pointing the gun at the person's head. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And then he just didn't decide to pull the trigger. And then he got killed for it, which, to be honest, when you're pointing a trigger at like 20 kids, yeah, okay. Like I'm not so much at a loss for your life. We can try to rehabilitate you, of course. I'd prefer that, but
this is just making me want to watch Phone Booth some more.
This is war. So, but I think getting back to it, the thing that I wanted to talk about is really the sort of like if he would have been more forward with his feelings to begin with, of feeling lonely and isolated from Darrow, as well as Darrow being more forward with his feelings and like general anxieties about anything, about Mustang, for instance. He didn't talk to anyone about Mustang and his stress there. Yeah, they all had to kind of like poke and prod at him and ploy. It would have led to a much better situation, better communication. Yeah, and Tactus would have never been in that scenario where he was holding kids hostage.
Yeah, and there's even a comment in this section where he talks about like letting the sort of, oh God, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he connects it to Roke and the way he's been treating Roke as sort of distant and not really paying attention to the friendship. And I think it's probably intentional, but it's definitely hindering him, definitely hurting everything about it. Is that that's in this section, right? Where Tactus is talking about always being sort of a second thought, and he says something
that was in the last section, but yes. Oh, okay. Because now we're in reflection on his death.
Oh, right.
But yeah. You know, like he buys the Stradivarius back and gets that, and you know is like learning to play because he wants to present it to Darrow again because he's kind of proud to be reemerging and you know kind of getting out of his like comfortable, I don't know, drunken, inebriated, drugged up state. Just trying, you know, hard to be a person. So it's interesting for sure. So within this scene as well, with all the Praetors in the room again. Severo here reminds me of that Guy Ritchie character, meaning most of them. the one in his movies that play very fast and loose, but like know their shit, ready to shoot. They throw their cards on the table. They grab all the chips. They walk out of the room. You know, they just love it. I think especially a scene that you had talked about previously, feeding Sophocles with like a chicken leg. You know, he like takes a bite and then he throws it on the table, and like kind of Sophocles kind of picks at it and plays with it. Kind of laughs and says something to him.
Also, like Sophocles is described like a fox, and the way like the interaction makes him seem like a normal sized fox, but it's also described that he's basically the size of a fucking wolf, which just tells me how much of a towering behemoth of a man Cavix is.
Right. All of these people are so incredibly big, with the exception, obviously, of Severo. I mean,
yeah,
you know, also a joke that Victor made it, I think right now, is that she called her Mustang like a little girl.
Severo's short for Golds, but if I remember right, he's like basically my size, right?
No, you're thinking Darrow is your size. A little bit taller.
Yeah,
Severo is like, I'm literally looking it up right now.
He's got to be
like noted.
Well over 6'4".
No, he's 5'9".
Oh shit!
Yeah, so he's tiny.
He is a little dude.
Yep,
that's shorter than you. I didn't know people were shorter than you.
Oh, fuck off. But yeah, Darrow is 7'1". Right. So taller than you. But yeah, so I think Mustang is as tall as you. But yeah. Yep. Yeah. So like Darrow's small. So Sophocles is a big deal. Like Sophocles is like an average, you know, bigger dog. And Severo's the tiny guy in the room.
Comparable to a wolf at one point. I remember that specifically.
He is a fox, but he's comparable to a wolf, which speaks to him just being able to be like swallowed by Cavax's size, you know, like it's interesting.
Right.
We also get a lot of politicking here around Victra, whether or not she's truly a good person or another potential spy.
Yeah.
Roke factors into it. And I think it really gets back to the theme of this book so far, like we talked about, and we've talked about throughout this episode, which is really trust and the nature of trust.
I was really annoyed with this section up until the point where Roke interjected. I was basically thinking to myself, like, we've had this conversation before. We've talked about her bloodline. We've talked about other people's bloodlines. We've talked about how she is not her family. She's not her sister. She's not her mother.
I think she said that to Darrow a lot. We've talked about it a lot for sure. Okay. But like she said it to Darrow a ton. You know, it's definitely been made a point.
And Roke made nothing but great reasons for why they should trust her. And I do trust her. I think, does she go? She doesn't go by Julii, does she?
She does. I mean, it's Victor Au Julii.
Her sister does not then. Antonia does not.
She's got a half sister. Yeah. Antonia's a half sister.
Right. But she doesn't go by Julii, even though she's kind of beholden to the Julii name.
I think it was Severus Julii. Severus Julii.
No, yes. There's a conversation early on where it says like she doesn't even call herself Julia. I can't remember. Anyway,
it might be the other sister, but I don't think so.
I think she's done more than enough to prove that if she were going to betray them, there were ample opportunities, like golden opportunities to do so, and she didn't. And like she should be trusted, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that there's no reason to not. It
felt very witch hunty in their conversations about it. It felt very Monty Python talking about the witch.
I agree with you. Burn her.
She has got a wart.
She has got a wart right there. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that the tough part here is that, you know, Roke steps up and he finally makes his stump speech about the quality of people, and measuring people by their parents is wrong and incorrect, the wrong way to do it. And I think it's very interesting. So we end this chapter with giant questions. We take back the fleet, then Mars. What?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward plan, man. Like, I don't know what your questions are. I mean, step 1, take fleet. Step 2, take Mars. Good plan.
Step 3, profit. Yep. Good. Good plan. So with that, we're going to roll into your predictions. We've got 3 this week. So we've got 3 questions. That's it. So rapid fire. Who's killing Pliny?
Oh, Severo. Severo will complete his collection, and it'll be very Yu-Gi-Oh like of left eye of Pliny, right eye of Pliny, pot of greed, which allows him to play multiple more cards. Tongue of Pliny. I don't remember.
Exodia. You were going for body parts of Exodia.
Yeah.
It's like left arm, right arm, head, left leg, right leg. But yeah,
the face of Pliny as the Exodia. I don't remember exactly how Yu-Gi-Oh works. I know Pot of Greed let you play more cards.
I think it lets you draw more cards.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
I
think it's draw 3.
I don't remember, man.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I don't blame you.
Anyway, yeah, Severo is going to just brutalize Pliny's face.
Okay. So what is the second question? What could possibly be up Darrow's sleeve?
Well, his arms, of course.
Yeah, we both acknowledge that this question is shit and that we're not going to talk about it ever again. Mm-hmm. I wrote it down in a haze when I was done. It's draw 2 cards. I wrote it down in a haze when I was done with the rest of the notes, and I was like, what are good, like, there are things to talk about. Like, there's a lot to talk about going forward, but I don't know. What's up Darrow's sleeve? His arms.
Where did the king keep his armies? In his sleeveys. Yeah, that's all I thought of when reading that question. So
you just like dad joked me. That hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so third and final question, because the second question is going away. Really, it's the second question. Darrow makes a note earlier about letting Aja escape. Why does he let her live instead of capturing her?
I think we talked about this a little bit, but
we did.
I think for the sake of Lorn, because I don't think Darrow could have killed Aja and maintained any sort of alliance with Lorn. I think Lorn would have, as we said, Lorn is a man of his word and takes his word as bond and all of that. And I think if one of his students were cut down in front of him, I don't think he would side with whoever did that, even if it is another one of his students. So I think the only way to get Lorn involved in this war is to let Aja go.
Fair. Okay. That's an interesting extra question you just answered there.
Yeah.
In addition to the other one. Cool. All right. So then next week we are going to be reading through chapter 39, which is the end of part 3. So you're going to read all the way through to the end of the Conquer. So that's where we'll leave you for this week. For us, the most important thing that you could do is if you could refer us to any friends, anything you can help do to grow and refer us, we really appreciate it. Otherwise, leaving an Apple podcast review or a review on your platform of choice or subscribing, all of those are very impactful. We'd appreciate it greatly.
Yeah. Beyond that, other than just kind of interacting with us on our social media, reviewing on whatever podcast media of choice for you is really, really important for getting those podcatchers. Is that how you call them?
Podcatchers. Yep.
Podcatchers to recommend us to other people. So I don't give a shit about reviews in general. Like I really don't. I don't look at them. I don't care about them. But I do know that a high percentage of 5-star reviews gets us recommended to more people. So I will show myself and ask for you to do that.
Our reviews are important. We generally don't care. We read and watch awful shit that gets like two stars on Rotten Tomatoes or 20% or whatever.
One of my favorite movies is The Toxic Avenger by Troma Films. I love it. It is like, oh, by all counts, and by my own count, it is a 1-star movie. But I fucking love it. But that said, nobody's getting recommended The Toxic Avenger.
Outside of you recommending it right now.
I will recommend it. Apparently there's a new series coming out based on it, which I am super pumped for. Anyway, maybe that was a troll from one of our friends. But first things first is word of mouth. If you've got a friend that would like the show, tell them about it. But if you don't, give us a good review and we'll be forever grateful. Beyond that, interacting with us on social media is always a fun time. We truly do pay attention to it. We just got some private messages from some listeners, and like I genuinely recognize them as somebody who had been liking some of our content. So I talked about that in our message back. It's heartwarming. It's great. It's wonderful. It's a lot of fun. And I love all of you that interact with us. So keep it up.
Yeah, it's great. You can also check out our recipes for our cocktails on our website. We are getting slowly better at this, and you may in the future see short form video content on Instagram, eventually maybe long form on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a great outlet for us to show you how we're making what we're making and how we're doing it. Look forward to that in the future in 2021. We're very excited for the new year. And thanks so far for listening. I mean, it's absolutely a big deal. Like PJ had said, it's been a hell of a year. I know this is going to come out slightly after the new year, but still, I can't help but be very grateful for the situation we're in, recording this shortly before the new year.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We'd love to hear your suggestions, opinions, and look forward to running an audience question at the end of these episodes at some point. We appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Have a great week and see you next week.